And I think this is going to be a year of elections in America, in Britain, and elsewhere. And I think that the voting trends will change to such a degree that the biggest loser is going to be Zionism. I think Zionism now is blown out of the water. It is an evil political ideology. What has been done to the Palestinians in Gaza is Zionism. It's under the hand of Zionism. And certainly nothing to do with Judaism, which is a great faith. And I really think that the Zionist project has now failed, and it's time to admit it and to look at another way of dealing with it. But what I found astonishing was the relationship for all to see between Washington and Israel.
So in 2008, 44 activists from 17 different countries defied Israel and sailed to Gaza and landed on Gazan soil. And one of them was British journalist, author, and activist Yvonne Ridley. 2 years later, another flotilla comprising of some 6 civilian ships departed for Gaza in an attempt to break Israel's naval blockade. And one of those ships, the Turkish vessel Mavi Marmara, was attacked by Israeli naval commandos who killed 10 activists, all of them Turkish. According to the UN report, all of the activists' deaths were caused by gunshots. And they said that the circumstances of the killing of at least 6 of them were in a manner consistent with an extra-legal, arbitrary, and summary execution. They tried 3 more times in 2015, 2016, and 2018, and each time Israel seized the ships and detained and deported the activists who were traveling on them. And now, today, in the midst of Israel's brutal assault on Gaza, another group of brave activists is departing for Gaza with a flotilla loaded with over 5,000 tons of much-needed aid. And these activists include the daughter of Che Guevara, the grandson of Nelson Mandela, and standing shoulder to shoulder with them, once again, is Miss Yvonne Ridley herself, and who joins me today. Thank you so much for joining us. Miss Ridley, is there a sense of deja vu for you that you're going down this road again?
There was, to a certain extent, because we were expecting to sail tomorrow, but that has now been cancelled because the flag that the ship sails under is from Guinea-Bissau, and it looks as though the Israelis have put an awful lot of pressure on the state of Guinea-Bissau to cause problems with the port authorities. It's all to do with sort of paperwork. Mm-hmm. And so at the moment, the ship is stuck in dock. And so there is a feeling of deja vu because with all previous sailings, the rogue state of Israel has done its utmost to stop those ships from even leaving the port of departure.
Yeah. So could you tell us what the plan is now? Is there like an alternate vessel that could be used? I mean, clearly Israel in this case is using diplomatic pressure, lawfare, bureaucratic delays to try and stymie this. But I was looking at the website of the Gaza Flotilla. I was reading all the testimonials and listening to them. You don't look like the lot to give up easily.
No, we're not. The majority of the crew are women, and when women are determined, you need to get out of the way. You know, every man in the world knows that. So We are determined, and a little bit of red tape is not going to hinder our mission.
I get the feeling that very little can, and I mean, I was just reading something you wrote when in 2008 you did land on Gaza's soil. You compared it to the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, and you said, and I quote, "Now I know how people felt when they tore down those first few bricks. Today is a huge victory of people over power." So I mean, let's zoom out a little bit. When we look at the world right now, yeah, we have almost all of the Western capitals united in their support for Israel. It doesn't matter how many people Israel kills; they're standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. On the other hand, we see the people, and so many young people. I mean, look at the way the student protests in America have just exploded. Right, and across the world. I mean, there's so many examples. I can't even list them all. Now, looking back, could you ever have imagined in 2008 that the people of the world would speak to power like the way they are now?
No, but it is absolutely incredible. The fear of being called anti-Semitic has long gone now. It means nothing. And the butchery and primitive nature of the assault on Gaza has shocked people. Never did they think they would be able to watch a genocide unfold on their TV screens. And people have been stunned. Of course, the younger generation, Generation Z, they don't watch TV anymore. They go on to TikTok. And of course, TikTok is has become a very anti-Zionist platform. And 9 out of 10 of every reports that it is doing on TikTok is pro-Palestinian. And the Zionists can't control it. So you have to wonder, is that the motivation for America to ban TikTok? Of the kids in America, you know, I just take my hat off and salute them. Doubt. They are incredibly brave, far more brave than when I was their age. They are refusing to bow under pressure. And I think that they're much more driven than the millennials, who I think became very self-centered. But Generation Z, they're absolutely amazing. And the scenes we are seeing in America are incredible. And I'm really pleased about that because, you know, America is supposed to be the superpower, the greatest democracy in the world. And all we see is that it is a fighting ground between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I find that incredibly depressing.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm really excited by what's happening in America today. And the kids are shaming their parents into coming out and supporting them as well, which is, you know, well done them.
Yeah, well done them. I mean, the kids are all right. Yeah, the kids are all right. The kids are, I think, better than all of us, right? I mean, they're incredible. Although they have stood on the shoulders of giants, you know, such as yourself, I would say. Do you think that that's going to cause lasting change? I mean, we do have precedent. We have the Vietnam protests. We have the anti-apartheid protests. I mean, when you look at it in the arc of history, the pro-Palestine protests sweeping the world, and that's something that would have been unthinkable even on October 6th, right? I would never in 1,000 years have predicted it. Do you think that though their voices are going to echo all the way to the power corridors of, you know, Congress, the White House, or any of the capitals of the Western world? How long will that change take?
When leaders fail us, and the people start to move and move in big numbers, then the leaders have to keep up. Otherwise, they will become irrelevant. And I think we are seeing that now. The politicians, most of whom are bought and owned by the pro-Israeli lobby, are sitting there at a total loss, in very real danger of being voted out of power, because they're torn between their masters, the Zionist lobby, which is all-powerful in America, and their real masters, who are the voters. And once politicians begin to realize that the masters are the voters, then we will, I think, enter a much better world than the one that we're inhabiting at the moment.
You would hope so. It's like, Alan Moore, right? He's one of my favorite writers. He wrote V for Vendetta, and there's this passage in there, is that our masters have not heard the people's voice for generations, and it is far, far louder than they remember. I want to move a little bit from America to the United Kingdom. I believe you're based in Scotland, right? And Labour, historically, right, it had a very, very different sort of view on Palestine, on the entire issue. Is there really any difference right now between the Tories and Labour when it comes to Israel, to Palestine, or is it just like sort of the same thing wearing different coats?
Well, Labour used to be the party of welfare, a party that cared about people, that fought against poverty. Now it has become the party of warfare. And we see that with Tel Aviv Keith, otherwise known as Keir Starmer, who has tried shamelessly to justify Israel's actions since October the 7th. And he was a former director of public prosecutions. He was the upholder of the law. He prosecuted the law in the international courts, and he called out using starvation as a weapon. He called that out as a war crime when he was prosecuting a nation that was guilty of that. And now he has this total blind spot, and he refused to call Israel out for starving a nation. All we're told from Labour is that Israel has a right to protect itself. That may be the case, but as the occupation force, it also has a care of duty to those who it occupies, and it has allowed an entire nation to end up on the brink of famine. Women are giving birth to babies who are destined to a very short life. Their mothers have no nutrients or vitamins to be able to produce milk. The babies are just little bags of bones, skeletons. The images that haunted me as a child from the 1940s concentration camps, where the Jews were starved to death by the Nazis, all those images are coming back to haunt me again. And if I can get flashbacks of the horrific images of the Holocaust, then I wonder what the soldiers in the Israeli Defense Force are seeing when they put a starving person in their crosshairs. Today, 3 mass graves have been discovered at the Al Nasser hospital. All of the bodies, the remains, were wearing hospital scrubs, which tends to suggest that they were medical staff. and they all had those plastic hand ties around their back, and they'd been shot in the back. They'd been executed. Again, war crimes. And you would have thought, after the International Court of Justice put Israel on notice that it was being investigated for genocide, that it would have modified and moderated its behaviour. But this is a rogue war machine which has no red lines, which has an insatiable, primitive, brutal appetite for slaughter. And quite frankly, I've not known anything like it. Even the bombing of the Iranian embassy. You know, the lowest bar we judge people from is the Second World War and Adolf Hitler. And even the Nazis were very careful not to break the Vienna Conventions over embassies. I don't recall a single embassy being attacked by the Germans. I may be wrong, but this was astonishing. And what was even more astonishing is not one country in the world condemned the attack on the Iranian embassy. And yet I remember during the war in Iraq visiting the British embassy in Baghdad, and it was intact and preserved, and there were people who were actually detailed to look after the embassy estate for Britain. And I remember also visiting the British embassy in Kabul, which had been empty during the control of the Taliban years. And again, that was intact. In fact, I was one of the first people invited to dine at the embassy, and we dined on a dinner service that had been perfectly maintained and preserved during the Taliban rule. So if the Taliban and Saddam Hussein could look after British embassies, then why on earth can't Israel show the same respect?
See, that's the thing.
It was shocking.
It is. And okay, so this is something that I've been trying to wrap my head around, and I'm sure many others have. And I was talking to historian Zachary Foster about this. I was even talking with this Israeli writer and columnist who's very, very critical of the absolute barbarity of Israel and the Israeli occupation forces. It's like a kind of psychosis, isn't it? I mean, it's absolutely psychopathic behavior. And I mean, I was just seeing this picture of Israeli troops in like full gear, machine guns, posing with the looted toys of the children of Gaza. I mean, these are children who have presumably been killed, certainly displaced, God only knows where they are. And I was reminded of how serial killers tend to take trophies of their victims. And for the life of me, I mean, like yourself, I can't think of another example, I mean, this depraved. And I can't understand what it is that can seemingly make an entire nation, or at least a very large part of a nation, behave in this way. I mean, you've been following the Palestine cause since you were a schoolgirl, right? If I recall correctly. I mean, how do you explain this? Is there an explanation?
To dehumanize an entire population of people, you have to dehumanize yourself first. You have to get right down into the gutter and be subhuman. And some Jewish people might find that offensive because the Germans did call them Untermenschen, which was subhuman. But normal human beings cannot behave like that. But what concerns me is that in Britain we have quite a few young men and women who have gone out and fought as reservists for the Israeli forces. And I am really worried about their mental states when they come back home, because the British Army takes this very seriously. It counsels all of its soldiers, especially those who've served in war zones, to try and look out for the signs of PTSD and trigger signs. And I can't imagine anybody is looking out for these young war criminals that are coming back home. And, you know, I fear for them. I fear for us. It's like sitting on a ticking time bomb. How long before one of them just goes crazy in a shopping mall? Or, you know, thankfully we don't have America's gun laws, but it's like sitting on a ticking time bomb.
For them, it's perfectly normal behavior. In fact, I mean, it's not even purely a British problem. I mean, I was seeing, you know, Canadian reservists, dual nationals, American, French. I mean, I was even following this movement called the March 30th movement, which is trying to prosecute these people in their second countries, you know, because they all have two, for war crimes. But I want to just come back to an earlier point, right? Like we were talking about, you know, you have to be subhuman to behave like this. I mean, you have to be absolutely dehumanized, absolutely degraded. I mean, words fail me. Okay, I think we'll have to invent new vocabulary for this. So that's the bulk of the Israelis. That's certainly the bulk of the Israeli forces, 100% the entirety of their current leadership. But what about the Western capitals? I mean, I know you spoke about the Zionist lobbies, the Israeli lobbies, the fear of being called anti-Semitic. But are they really that strong? I mean, is there not a pushback? Like, I'm just going to give one example. I mean, in America, for the first time, I've seen actual politicians calling out AIPAC, which is the strongest American lobby. I mean, recently an AIPAC-backed candidate lost the primaries to an opponent who was actually like vocal against AIPAC. There's this Twitter account called AIPAC Tracker, which is just making lives hell of all the politicians who have taken money from the various Israeli lobbies. Is that hold so pervasive that Western capitals who would scream human rights, if, and I'm being reductive here, but if someone were to stub their toe in what we call the developing world, and here there's absolute horror, and they're absolutely silent. I don't get that. I don't understand it.
I think that the whole order of things is changing. For instance, I'm not sure if the global South will ever forgive us in the West for what is happening right now on the ground in Gaza. I know that a lot of voters will not forgive their politicians, and I think this is going to be a year of elections in America, in Britain, and elsewhere, and I think that the voting trends will change to such a degree that the biggest loser is going to be Zionism. I think Zionism now is blown out of the water. It is an evil political ideology. What has been done to the Palestinians in Gaza is Zionism. It's under the hand of Zionism. And certainly nothing to do with Judaism, which is a great faith. And I really think that the Zionist project has now failed, and it's time to admit it and to look at another way of dealing with it. But what I found astonishing was the relationship for all to see between Washington and Israel. And it was the tail wagging the dog. Tel Aviv was telling Joe Biden, this is the way things are going, and this is what we're going to do, and you are not going to stop us. And Joe Biden was saying rather feebly, I don't want you to bomb Rafah. In fact, he might actually have said that's a red line.
He did, something like that. No, he said there are no red lines, but then he also confused Rafah with Haifa. So, I mean, God help us, with a guy like that in charge. And, as far as Biden goes, though, right, American presidents have in the past told Israel to stand down. Ronald Reagan did.
Yes.
George Bush Senior, George W. Bush, and anyway, the elder Bush. The elder Bush told them to do it. This guy just, he seems to enjoy Netanyahu humiliating him. And in fact, he seems to be staking his own government, his own party, his own re-election, sacrificing it at the Zionist altar. Again, that's one of the many things I don't understand.
Yeah, Joe Biden is taking his orders from a crook, a man who in a few weeks' time is going to be up on fraud charges yet again in a criminal court, and he's taking orders from this piece of criminal dirt. It's astonishing. And Netanyahu is in the last gasps of his own premiership, which probably makes him the most dangerous man on the planet today.
Dangerous man on the planet.
Because he has absolutely nothing to lose.
Yeah. And it's in his own political interests and personal interests to just have this carnage continue as long as possible. Ms. Ridley, just one final question. We know that change is coming. We can see it. I mean, you would have to be blind to deny it. Do you think it will come in time to save the Palestinians?
Yes, I do. You can't kill an idea. And the Palestinians have been so resilient. Israel was in a state of shock. I think psychologically it was shattered by October 7. But if you oppress people and you cage them and you take away their water, their basic human rights, something will snap. I, for one, was not at all surprised by the events that happened on October 7. What did surprise me was that it took nearly 10 hours for the Israelis to respond. I've been to Gaza twice now, and if anybody goes near those fences, they're shot at. And yet, Hamas broke through 21 areas of fencing and ran amok for 10 hours. But the Israelis, they have to stand up as well. There's some very brave people from the Jewish community who are standing up. Yes. This is not in my name. And I know that a lot of the families of the hostages are standing up against Netanyahu and being very courageous as well. And I really feel for those people. As a former hostage, I do feel for them. And I hope their loved ones are returned to them soon. But I would say to them, Hamas could have handed them back last month if Netanyahu had just done a deal. And the longer this war goes on, the reality is the more difficult it is going to be for the hostages to survive, because they're being bombed and attacked by the same army as well.
And gunned down, as a matter of fact, in more than one occasion. Miss Ridley, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep you any further. You've got to go take care of your throat, and you will need your journey, your strength for the journey to come and many, many journeys. After that,
Yes.
wishing you the best of luck. And once again, thank you so much. Really hope that you guys manage to set sail safely. Take care.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Assalamu
Bye-bye. It
alaikum.
was a pleasure. Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much.